Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Oh, we're going to learn about a lot today. If you're somebody that experiences some challenges in your life, maybe you've got unexplained pain, chronic challenges, you've got stuff going on within your life relationship wise, maybe traumas that you're dealing with, something happened and you're trying to navigate through it. She helps people with it all the time. And today, specifically, we're going to dig into something called IFS and how that can be a game changer. Marianne H. Hennigar joins us today. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
Steve, I'm fantastic. The sun came out today, and so it's delightful.
You know, it's funny. We just happened to be not far from each other on Long Island, New York. And yeah, I'm in another room in the studio and I just saw it looked like light coming through. I'm like, oh yeah. And I looked out. I don't think there's a cloud in the sky right now, but it hasn't been that way the last couple of days around here. So it feels good. Feels good.
Yeah, it really does. It's really nice. Just went for a walk by the ocean. Really, really nice. So
I know where you are. Did you take a walk by the Sound?
I walked by Poquat.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Long Island Sound. Great.
Yeah.
All right. IFS stands for what?
It stands for Internal Family Systems. And it was developed by a gentleman named Richard Schwartz. And today I was just going to mention a book that has come out in the last little while, written by one of his students or a psychiatrist unto his own named Frank Anderson. This is a lovely book for both people in the public as well as practitioners. And basically it breaks down different internal quote unquote archetypes within our psyche that are designed to have special jobs to help us navigate difficult life situations.
So when we talk about those delicate life situations, before we go into the meat and potatoes of IFS, those difficult situations can be what?
Traumatic. And they can cause us to have trouble relationally with those we love, with other people in the world, with each other, and on a more global basis. And usually what I say is that hurting people hurt other people. And when people are able to navigate their trauma and release the energy trapped in the body and come to understand themselves and their paths more deeply, they end up softening towards everyone they know and become more relational.
I truly get what you're saying as I look back on my life and look at those people that were hurters, if you will. And not even me, just even just relationships in general, looking at, people connected to other people. And I just observe it. Those people that did the hurting obviously were hurting. You could see, you knew what their background was, and they just continue to do it. Why do they do that?
Because we don't really understand our autonomic nervous system, and it causes us to act and react as soon as we have what is popularly called a trigger or triggers. And so our rational relational part of our brain, which is the neocortex, becomes suspended. And when that becomes suspended, we go on fight, flight, freeze. And so when that rational thought goes away, person very often later on, they've calmed down, don't know why they acted that way, don't understand why they said those horrible things to their loved one. They just know that they were, off in the stratosphere.
The people that do the hurting because they're hurting, they often deny it, or they're in denial that they're really doing anything bad, or they don't realize the magnitude of the hurt that they're imposing on somebody else. Is that often true?
It is often true. And it's, like I'd love to say, we don't come with a training manual nor an owner's manual. And so, we've touched on transgenerational trauma before. These can be familial habits and behaviors, or even cultural habits and behaviors that end up hurting others with no intention at all. Even look at culturally when we talk about some of the things that have been talked about in terms of systemic behaviors, seen as behaviors, rules, and ways of conduct which are diminishing of others, but really, in many instances, it's cultural habit, not realizing the harm that's being caused.
Sure. And if you are in a situation, and I promise we're going to get deep into IFS in a second, but if you're in a situation on the receiving end of the hurt from somebody who's obviously hurting, whether they believe it or not, is there anything you can do? Or is it you can't control other people and just control your emotions? Because it's my belief a lot of times you can tell somebody, do you realize what you've done? Do you continue to do this and it's horrible? They don't care. They're not listening. They already moved on.
They may not have the capacity to process that because they don't know what to do with their own feelings.
Yeah.
And so it would be cultural awareness. That's why all these people who are in the neuroscience world, in psychology and in body psychology, psychiatry, some in the medical field, they're spreading the word about what happens with cascading emotions and hormones that hijack the relational part of our personality.
So IFS, let's
So
talk about it.
IFS, and I'm just going to touch on it because it's important for me to let everybody know that there is a formal structure to this, and again, in terms of archetypes, as the authors would mention, and they do talk a lot about neuroscience and explaining what is happening in the brain system and the nervous system that activate. And this psychoeducation or neuroeducation, though it may seem confusing at first, does make so much sense as people are able to monitor themselves when they start having emotions and old habits run away with them. And so I just highly recommend that anybody who is interested, even this is on audiobook through Audible as well. It's a great way to listen and read and digest and absorb information. And so I just wanted to make sure, and I was going to read a little excerpt from the very famous psychiatrist and author Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the seminal book on The Body Keeps the Score. And he has a trauma center in Boston from which this gentleman was under his tutelage and became a psychiatrist, while also helping himself in his own therapeutic path with internal family systems. And eventually he met the originator, Dr. Schwartz. And so now he writes a lot about the internal family systems so that people can understand. So I won't go through a lot of complex stuff that's going to be confusing. It's better if people go ahead and get their audiobook and really start chewing over these ideas, because this is a beautiful way to process trauma.
And I love what you said just now, that the body keeps score. It does in many ways.
Yeah. And so when I first heard of IFS a few years ago, I was pretty excited because I'd already been doing my own version of that from way back when I was working with people as a massage therapist. So I'll talk a little bit about how I integrate it. And if people are interested in reading more on this information, it is readily available on the internet.
IFS can help us navigate different traumas in basic terms, and you know, you're holding up a book that's that thick. There's a lot to learn here, but in basic terms, how can the system help us navigate the traumas?
Okay, so I use it in a basic form. Frank Anderson and Dr. Schwartz write about some very like a protector. There's just several different roles, and then what the end result is that eventually those characters that cause a person to act in old habit patterns, maybe things have changed enough in their life that protector doesn't have to have the same role. So say they don't have to come forth with aggression. They can have a different role of monitor or anything that the person comes up with in their therapeutic practice. So the better way that I can describe it, how I do it, is I go back through the ages of different people's childhood into adulthood, and ask them when they're having a traumatic memory, what is the earliest age they can remember having those feelings. And sometimes they can come up with an age, sometimes it's just a vague memory.
Hmm. I did a timeline regression in hypnotherapy that sounds a little bit like this, where and the goal was eradicating or dealing with 5 negative emotions. So the practitioner would say, go back to the first time you remember sadness. Think about it. It's almost as if you picture a timeline and you're flying above the timeline, and where are you going to drop in? And, is it right here? I think it was, but maybe not. All right, let's go back up again and go over here. Maybe it's a little bit more further back. Interestingly, I didn't even have to share with the practitioner what the memories were.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so the way that actually, that's the timeline, and then I combine it with, okay, now we're at a garden party, or we're at the round table. And in the round table are different individuals representing different parts of the person that I'm working with. There'll be different ages and different jobs. And so, and also very often the person will incorporate in their round table or their garden party group, they will incorporate other people who have been influential in their lives as representing parts of themselves inside. And so we get to learn a lot about prejudices, hurts, opinions that don't mesh. Somebody may be standing up at the table yelling. And so what we do eventually is find that there's harmony. So there may be a 3-year-old there, that client of the age that they're at gets to pick up that 3-year-old and hold her because she was afraid. And so this is a timeline combination with parts work. Yes, you're right on with that. And what were your results with your timeline regression?
I feel it made a difference in me, I guess, squelching those feelings. The goal is not to get rid of them, but those feelings of let's say anger, sadness, whatever it might be, in the timeline were kind of removed. I feel like it allowed just a
Right.
more calm feel.
Am I hearing you say that it turned the volume down?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if you were, 1 not being very activated or very upset, and 10 being very, very upset, you might have gone from maybe an 8 down to a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And uh, interestingly, you deal with it differently moving on from the session. So next time the negative emotion comes up, sadness, anger, whatever it might be, that you react differently. I feel since I had that. I want to go back to the round table for a second.
Yes.
Is that an exercise where you tell somebody, all right, we're at the garden party, backyard party, round table. Do you tell the person you're working with that you want them to invite versions of themselves, maybe of different ages, or are you just inviting whoever you want to invite? And it could be relatives or it could be, friends, whatever.
Who's showing up? I try to keep it very open-ended so that we harness their creativity. So
Hmm.
like the garden party example was directly from narrative that I had exchanged with that client. The round table, it seemed like for this other client, somebody was always jumping up, or 2 or more characters were always jumping up. So that client painted a picture of a round table. And then eventually we came to like separate offices where they're doing their jobs, because that's what each character in the round table has, is a specific job for running the system. So somebody needs to be the accuser. Somebody needs to be the appeaser. Somebody needs to be the fighter. And so what we do is this little wordplay and exploration with the client. So I'll ask is, what job does that individual have? Well, they just think it's not fair. So then what we get to is, well, is that from now or from before? So we really search around the timeline. There may be a little girl at the table or a little boy at the table. There may be somebody sitting off in the corner. There may be somebody ignoring everybody else. And so, usually the soft goal is to see if everybody can get to the table and be calm and be in a good place, or understanding their job. Again, maybe the fighter now no longer has the job of fighter. Their new job is to search out stuff.
Is this you confronting yourself along the way at different ages? Because I remember in a hypnotherapy session, I confronted my younger self, like eyes closed during the session, see myself there. And then I was told to talk to myself,
Right,
reassure myself as a, I'm the big guy now. There's the little guy, example, hypothetical, we'll never leave you alone. We'll always got your back, whatever it might be, or I'm sorry. Maybe that's it. Is it
right.
similar to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, depending on the session, you may need to find out if they have a job for protecting your psyche. And if they still have that job, or if they need something, because sometimes they need something, and sometimes that younger part needs an update that you were okay in the long run, that you were able to navigate it. So it's not unusual for me to ask the person what does this younger person need? You'll come up with it, because it's not right for me to superimpose it, unless I may ask, do they need a hug? Do they need to go for a walk? Often the reply for young children is they need to play. Okay, because that's how children heal themselves. They heal themselves through play.
I didn't even think of that. Really?
Well, if you think about when little kids draw out things about the family or things that were hard, that is their processing tool, is drawing and coloring and showing the characters. So it's very, very lovely gift. And it's also a wonderful thing that you can harness as an adult.
I might have had a moment here. I wanted to be a syndicated cartoonist, and that is how going through, challenges in childhood, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even up till I was 22, I was still drawing cartoons. And the main cartoon almost became syndicated, by the way. The main cartoon character was me.
There you go. See? So you just confirmed what I just said, right?
Yeah.
You harnessed a naturally endowed processing gift, and you wanted it to be your career.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted radio and broadcasting. I wanted cartooning, and they both kind of were going the same way. And then I got a job very early, literally 17, had my first paycheck. I got a big job when I was still young. So dabbled in the cartooning a little bit more, and then stepped off of that and then continued on. Later opened up a marketing agency. So the graphic stuff still stayed with me. But I never thought of it that way, as maybe drawing was a way to process or purge or whatever it might be. Interesting.
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff.
Would you say that when we see children playing and it's helping them sometimes cope with things that have gone on in their lives, is that why they have imaginary friends? Is that why they, invent certain things as they're playing? They'll take, $1, toy or whatever, and use it in a different way. Is that all part of that?
It's part of creativity. It's part of processing, because, developmentally, and so often this is, true that parents don't have children come with a manual either, to understand that different developmental stages have different capacities for cognitive processing and relational processing. So having play for an imagination and fantasy and storytelling, those are all such vital tools for wellness. And imagination, if a child is able to be highly imaginative, they can do some pretty amazing processing that way. And also, it can denote a brain that is not in overload if they're able to access creativity.
Is it really a purge? Like when you say overload, if we don't.
It's a processing, because I think that it takes a long time to develop the cognitive tools to figure out what happened in your childhood, but the art and creativity can help it be manageable enough to save the material for adulthood, so that the child can somehow soothe or regulate themselves.
With IFS, is this something that you fairly regularly implement to help people?
Well, my version, yes, it pops up. I don't do the formal like Dr. Anderson and Dr. Schwartz do, but like I said, I highly recommend that people look at that. I employ it just more on an organic level. If I get a hint from somebody, like say, even a timeline thing around, this is not IFS, but timeline thing around car accidents. I don't talk to the person about the most recent accident first. I mean, yes, I hear their story, but I look back at way back when, because that's where the trauma started from, and subsequent wreck trauma has compounded on top of that. And so that would be a timeline thing. But when I bring people to roundtable or garden, it's usually when they're really coming from a young place about old memories, because you can tell with people that if they feel super irrational, very often it could lead to childhood experience that didn't get to sort itself out. And so very extreme response to like a minor occurrence, what seemingly minor occurrence, might denote a childhood trauma that's been reactivated.
Gotcha. Wow. Is it reasonable to believe that the majority, if not all of us, are walking around with trauma, and substantial trauma?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's big trauma with a little t, and there's, there's little trauma with a little t and big trauma with a big T. And, how we learn to navigate that depends on all sorts of stuff, where we had family of origin that helped us develop resiliency, or if we had to rely on super resiliency, so it becomes a defense mechanism. But yes, I mean, if you see a big tree in the wind, the tree will bend in the wind. And what we're looking for is the capacity to not be so stiff that we cannot loosen up enough to allow our imagination and allow for maybe some help from somebody or doing some great reading, that we allow that trauma to release from our bodies. And this is just newly common language in our culture about neuroscience and neurobiology, right? So most
Interesting.
of us have had stuff happen. And that's the thing that we don't realize. Everybody that's walking around, they got something on board.
Yes, and those little T traumas can hold us back from big things later in our life, and we might not even see it. It could be, hypothetically, in a moment here, you could have a fear of abandonment, from back when you were a child. But guess what? Now you're navigating as an adult relationships, and your attachment style, all of that's coming into play of your fear of abandonment, and you're holding on to relationships that don't serve you and all of that. That's your job to help sort that out. Actually, it's our job to help sort that out with your help.
I just hold the frame and ask interesting questions.
You hold the mirror. Just here, this is what you need to see. Sometimes, yeah. You can do this anywhere on the planet, virtually, just like we're talking here. How do we connect with you, Marianne?
Right. It's probably best to go to my website, which is Insight Healing INC. That's Insight Healing INC. And I will respond to you quickly if you leave me a message.
Insight's a great word, because you're giving insight and also giving a sight to what's inside of us so we can heal.
Yeah. Yeah. Really
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah. Great talking with you today, and looking forward next time we get together.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.